through like the first part of today, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about, well, just a bit of an introduction to the whole idea. And as you probably know, deity worship is a very important part of Gaudiya Vaishnava theology and liturgy. And what we're going to cover here is like quite elementary sort of things, covering the practice and the worship of the deity form of the Lord. And we see that, you know, deity worship is also referred to archana, and in our acharyas give many different levels of worship, or many different descriptions of worship, and we're going to be covering a fairly elementary method of worship in this, which is more suited to home worship, and especially for people who have quite busy schedules. So, like I said, there's different standards of worship, and you know what you see happening in a temple, for instance, may not necessarily be so applicable to someone in their home environment. So I'll try to cover different ways of doing the different procedures that will be applicable to your situation. Well, hopefully they'll be applicable to your situation. And yeah, and you see, you may find that, you know, like when you speak to different devotees about deity worship, they'll give you different understandings or standards of worship. But largely, you have to look at what's applicable in your environment, you know, and it's not necessarily that one method is right and the other method's wrong. There's going to be different ways of doing it. And of course, in presenting this as much as possible, we're going to be referencing Srila Prabhupada. So as I was saying, we're going to be referencing, obviously, Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Also, we'll be extensively referring to ISKCON's deity worship book, known as the Pancharat Pradeep, or soon to be released as the Method of Worship. Then, you know, and as we know in Vedic tradition, the primary source of evidence is Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Now, obviously, we you know, extensively present what Prabhupada talks about, but also his spiritual master, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But also, you'll find in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are many references from Srila Prabhupada covering the topic of deity worship. So we'll try to do that as much as we can. Okay, so what I want to do now, I'll just, if you don't mind, is I'll just go over a little bit of an outline of what we're going to cover. Now, I had a conversation with Srinivas Prabhu about this, and you know, I've got many different, you know, because I've taught home worship many times, and I've got three basic class structures, or three basic seminar structures: one for 6 hours, one for 8 hours, one for 12 hours. Now, in the longer ones, I show how to bathe and dress Gaura deities, and I'm not sure how practical that will be here. Of course, if I can work it out with the videoing, I may try to incorporate that, but it's just a matter of like me sitting at home on the floor with my camera and recording it and seeing if I can put together a video, and then looking at the video and seeing if you're going to learn anything from it. But obviously these types of things are generally better done in person. But I just want to go quickly through now, or not too quickly. I'm not going to rush it. I'll just show you, where are we? Sorry, oh, here we go. Keynote. So this is just a quick overview of the course, just to let you know what we're covering each week. So this week here, obviously, we're doing the overview, which is the introduction. Our main topic here is why do deity worship, and we're looking at, you know, there'll be an introduction. Then we have a definition of deity worship, reasons for doing deity worship, and the goals of deity worship, or the benefits and outcomes of deity worship. So we look at, you know, what is a deity, what is deity worship, why do deity worship? Yeah, very important aspects of it. Hang on, let me just, where's my mouse gone? I can't find my mouse. Someone wants to, hang on, I've got to admit someone that, like I said, I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to Zoom. Someone else joining. Sorry. Okay, so we'll go back to that. So welcome to Nrsimha Prabhu. All right, so what is deity worship? Why? What is a deity? Why do deity worship? And of course, the benefits of deity worship. Now, of course, we understand in the material world because of our, lack of spirituality, basically, or lack of spiritual evolution. We need some motivation. So obviously, there's going to be significant benefits to doing something like deity worship. The next weekend, we'll cover the balance. This is a point that Srinivas Prabhu brought up with me, was devotees often find challenge how to balance between their busy lives and doing deity worship at home, or how to balance home deity worship with service in the temple, etc. So we'll explore that a bit. Balancing with other servers, balancing a busy life. Then the week after that, inviting the Lord into your home. We start to get into some of the more practical elements of it, like things like first off, I guess, look at who should you worship. Like, what sort of deities? Should I have deities? Should I have pictures? Should I, have a shalagram? Who should you worship and how to figure that out? Then, what is an altar? What does an altar look like? How to set up an altar, and, where to position it, etc., like that. All right. So then week 4, there's a very important topic, probably the most, someone else, hang on, I'll just have to kick out of this for a second and let Shyam Bhatia in. Okay. Back to the slideshow. Welcome, Shyam Bhatia Prabhu. Okay, so purity. This is probably the single most important element of deity worship. Srila Prabhupada, whenever he would give Brahman Diksha to people, he would always encourage his leaders, or he would encourage the devotees, teach them how to be clean, teach them how to be Brahmins. So a very, very important element of deity worship. So we talk about the importance of purity, and also we look at practical things like archman, and point out not just why cleanliness is important or purity is important in deity worship, but why it's important in the practice of bhakti in general, and how it's going to assist us. And then also try to explore practical elements of cleanliness standards at home. What sort of things you should be doing at home in terms of cleanliness. Then the next one we'll cover is, does he eat? Now, of course, we all know that Krishna does eat, but we want to explore things like, why would Krishna accept our offerings? What is it that I'm doing that's so wonderful that Krishna would accept it? Then also we'll cover how to offer food to Krishna. Then in the last one I've got scheduled at this point is arati, how to offer arati, what an arati is, what all the items represent in the arati, different types of arati that we do in ISKCON, and how to do it. Yeah. And then, of course, if it's practical, then we could cover, if you think there's more need, we could cover waking, resting, and possibly bathing and dressing. But that's going to be a logistical thing that I need to figure out. Okay, it's not just a matter of me sitting down and talking. So, without further ado, we can move on from there. Now, as I mentioned, I just sent an email out this morning, and the idea I had was that I would just present for about 40 minutes and then leave time for questions and answers at the end. So if you have any specific questions you want to ask, then that'll be a good time for it. Okay. Let's go back to there. Okay. All right. So I guess the first, one of the important elements we find here in this material world is everyone's looking for relationships. We're all, striving for relationships, but often we find that people become frustrated in relationships. And we see from that, you'll find that, folks will get themselves a dog or a cat or a goldfish or something like that. And they find they think they can have a satisfactory relationship there. But ultimately, the fact of it is, in this material world, is we're going to find frustration in all these different types of relationships because we're not actually looking in the right place. We're not actually trying to repose our loving affection in a place where it can be fully reciprocated, or actually even more than fully reciprocated. Because it's just like, we find when we have relationships with friends, the friend might not interact with us the way we want them to, or they may say things that are unpleasant, or they may do things we don't like. And we become disturbed or frustrated by that. And then you get a dog or a cat. And I don't know if anyone on the chat today or on Zoom today has got a cat, but cats are generally quite independent natured creatures, and the only time you ever see them is when they want something, so that also can be quite a frustrating relationship. And of course, dogs and whatever, goldfish, you just feed them and that's about it. You can't pat them, you can't do anything like that, they're just in a tank. So obviously in those kind of relationships, in those kind of exchanges, there's limitations, there's going to be frustration. So and even we find that it's becoming more and more popular in this day and age that people are trying to find their relationships through the internet. Like we have this thing called Facebook. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I've got so many thousands of friends on Facebook," but still they're not happy. They're not satisfied in their relationships, and that's because they're not looking in the right place. So the most satisfying relationship we're going to find is when we have a relationship with a person who is able to reciprocate with us fully. And that person, of course, is Krishna. He's the only person who can actually reciprocate with us fully. So, the relationship also, as we find in any situation, a relationship generally develops from an exchange of service or exchange of mutually exchanged activities. So deity worship is like this. It's just like I know myself when raising a child. I didn't carry the child in the womb or anything like that. Whereas the mother does carry the child in the womb, and therefore she naturally has an affection for it. But for the father, that's not there. But when the child's born, the father starts to do various services for the child. Bathe the child, dress the child, feed the child, care for the child when the child's awake crying at night, things like that. And in this way, affection develops. So in the same way, of course, we're not going to have Krishna waking up in the middle of the night crying, but in the same way, we develop affection for Krishna through this relationship of service to the Lord. And this is partially what deity worship is about, is developing this relationship with the Lord through this reciprocal exchange of service. And it is a reciprocal exchange. And the more we engage in serving the deity, the more we'll find there's reciprocation there. All right, so that's just the basic introduction. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about what is a deity. And of course, we may have seen forms of deities, and there's all different types of deities that are there. Radha Krishna deities, Gaunitai deities, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Nrsimha, Lakshmi Narayan, Shalagram, Govardhan, Shila. So many different deities that we devotees worship. As any of you who started early would have seen that little slideshow I was running, showing different deities, and so they're all a form of Krishna in one way or another. But the thing is that it's really important to understand that there's a very nice story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, actually, the story of Sakshi Gopal. And we know that whoever's read that story or heard that story knows that when the Brahmana, when he went to Jagannath Puri, he went to Vrindavan, to speak to Gopal and ask Gopal to be a witness. And he struck up a conversation with Gopal. Then at one point he said to Gopal, he said, "My dear Lord, you're not a statue. You're directly the son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna." So this is the concept, and this is a very, very essential understanding that we need to develop in our service of the Lord, in our deity worship, is to understand that the deity is directly Krishna. And the more we're able to function in that way, the more we're able to serve Krishna in that way, the more Krishna will manifest to us as the deity. So a very, very important point. And of course, we see that traditionally, Deities were made according to the description given in the scriptures, particularly in South India. It still happens in South India. You'll have a stapati, who is an artisan who crafts the deity. Yet these days we find it's not so much like that. In North India particularly, you'll find the deities are made just by some sort of craftsman who's just following the tradition that his father has given or whatever that the family's been doing for many, many years. And sometimes you'll find many of the deities, their forms are very, very crude. But nonetheless, even though the form of the deity may be crude, even though the form of the Lord may not be necessarily done according to scripture, we see that still the Lord is fully capable of manifesting that form, and he does manifest in that form due to the love of the devotee. So there's a really interesting analogy that we can describe in this regard. Now, at the end, I think you all have a WhatsApp group. I'm hoping there's a WhatsApp group with everyone on the group. And Srinivas, if you could add me to that WhatsApp group. I have a number of documents I'd like to share with you later on, and also some links to, we have a, ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry has a YouTube channel as well as a website. And on the YouTube channel, there are a number of videos, and I'll share with you today some links specifically related to the topics we've discovered. The topics we've covered today. And in particular, there's one really nice video of Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk in the Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. And in that talk, he's discussing, or I think Madhavisa Maharaj at the time asked him, that they say our deity worship is idol worship. And Srila Prabhupada is very strongly, refuting this notion that it's idol worship. And then he uses a really, an example we know well of the post box and the post office. And he makes the point that, if you put you put your letter in the post box, then the letter will go to its destination. And you're short of that. Yet if you decide you don't want to pay the postage, you want to, save the, whatever it is, $1 something for a stamp, and you're going to make your own post box, and you paint it red. It might look just like a post box. And you write, Australia Post on the side of it, and you put your letter in there. And Srila Prabhupada, he makes the point. He says the letter will stay there for 1,000,000 years. It won't go anywhere. And the point he really brings out, which is very, very important here, is the reason it works is because it's authorized. And this is why because he makes the point, is like the post box is as good as the post office because it's authorized by the post office. And by putting your letter in there, you follow the required protocol of putting a stamp on it and addressing it properly, the postcode, etc. And you can be assured that your letter will go to the destination. So in the same way, if we follow this authorized process of deity worship in the authorized manner, and this is a really, really important point. And Srila Prabhupada, he makes this point in a, whereas I think it's, let me just find if I can see the reference for you. It's a letter he wrote to Shama Sundarabhu in 1969. And he makes the point, if we keep these forms of the Lord without worshipping the deity under regular principles, it will gradually turn into idol worship, which is an offense. So we may have a deity, but if we're not worshipping the deity properly according to the directions of the Shastra and the Acharyas or the Guru, whatever, then it's idolatry. We can't just make up our own method of worship. And Srila Prabhupada, the example he gives, we can't just make up our own post box and think it's going to work. So in the same way, Krishna has given, Krishna and the sages, particularly personalities like Narad Muni and others, have given this method of worship. And if we follow the method of worship, Srila Prabhupada's given us a very, very, if you look in these other shastras like Hari Bhakti Vilas, Narad Pancharatra, etc., the method of worship given by the acharyas is somewhat complicated compared to what we do now. But Srila Prabhupada, as an authorized representative of the Guru Parampara, he's given a method of worship which is quite suitable to the modern day. And if we follow that method of worship, then we will achieve the ultimate goal. And the reason being is because the deity and the Lord are non-different, same person. The deity is Krishna directly. There's the pratima nahi tumi sakshad brajendananda, it says. Sakshad means the same. It's the same as Nanda Maharaj's son. So no different. And so if we just follow the authorized process, then we will achieve the goal in no time at all. Okay. So just wanted to look a little bit at also the notion of what is deity worship. So as I was saying before, deity worship, not just the deity, but the process of deity worship also is an authorized process, meaning, it's not like we made it up ourselves and we authorized it. It's authorized by the acharyas. It's authorized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. There's an important section in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 27, and it's called Lord Krishna's Instructions on Deity Worship, where Krishna is instructing Uddhava what he finds satisfying in the process of deity worship, how to satisfy him through the process of deity worship. So we can see that not only is it authorized by the acharyas and the great sages, it's authorized by Krishna himself. So that's a very important point to keep in mind. And then I was just making a note there. So it's been given us to us by the previous acharyas. Now, if you're familiar with the Bhagavatam, you'll know that right in the beginning of the first canto, there's a conversation going on between Shaunaka Rishi and the sages at Naimisharanya. And, it describes there how the sages in Naimisharanya, they had gathered there at Naimisharanya to perform a 1,000-year sacrifice that would bring benefit to the whole world. So this is the nature of a saintly person, is they want to act in a way that's beneficial for everyone. So in the same mood, or in the same light of this, we see that the various sages have at different times given different instructions on how to do deity worship. And most prominently Narad Muni, but also other personalities we see in the Gaudiya line. There have been a number of Jan Chandra Goswami and a few other personalities have given different guidance on how to do deity worship. And of course, we see that our own Srila Prabhupada has given extensive direction on how to do deity worship and has set up temples all around the world where one of the primary activities of the temple is deity worship. Also, he encouraged devotees to worship the deity at home. So we can see that in our Gaudiya line that many directions are given there for the process of deity worship. So essentially, in our conditioned state, we cannot perceive the Lord directly. Neither can we have a direct exchange with the Lord because of our conditioned state, because of our material senses. Because, as we understand, Krishna's nature is he is fully transcendental. And we also are fully transcendental, but right now we're embodied. We're embodied. We're in this body that's, we're covered by the various elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And these, in one sense, they serve as an obstacle for us to contact directly with spirit. So, understanding this situation, the Lord, out of his compassion, has descended here in the deity to give us this opportunity to serve him directly, and to have this loving exchange with him directly. So that's just a little bit of information about what is deity worship, why we do deity worship. It's just basically it's to give the facility to the living entity, the conditioned living entity in this world, to have a direct, tangible, loving exchange, because it needs to be tangible for us because of our conditioned nature, because of the influence of Kali Yuga. Unless we can feel things or see things or touch things, we don't really believe them so much. Yet when we have the process of deity worship there before us, we can touch the deity, we can bathe the deity, we can dress the deity, we can feed him, we can do so many things directly for him. and that gives us that direct, tangible exchange. Now, I want to move on to the next topic I wanted to cover, and that is why worship the deity. Now, there's many different reasons that are there in Prabhupada's books and in the scriptures why worship the deity, and we see that it's described by our acharyas that deity worship is especially beneficial for those who are in the beginning stages of bhakti, because when we're in the beginning stage of bhakti, as I was just mentioning, it's very hard to have a tangible experience of Krishna. And in order to convince us of the process of bhakti, in order to convince us that we're doing the right thing, we need a tangible experience. It's just like when you're eating something. You put it in your mouth and it tastes good. So this gives you that tangible experience. Yes, I should keep eating. But if you put, the other day I bit into an apple and it was rotten inside. So what's your instinct? You just spit it out straight away because it's not palatable. So it's the same with the practice of bhakti. Is we need to have tangible experience that we're doing the right thing, that we're moving in the right direction. So through the process of bhakti, through the process of deity worship, we get this tangible experience of exchange with God, because we're bathing him, we're dressing him, we're offering him arati, we're feeding him, we're waking him up in the morning, we put him to bed at night. We might sing bhajans for him, we can read scriptures to him. There's so many things we can do for the pleasure of the Lord that will help us to develop this sense of a tangible experience with Krishna. So, and of course, as I was mentioning earlier on, also is in the execution of bhakti, we need. It's just like I was just saying then. We just need some motivation that we're moving in the right direction. That what I'm doing is the right thing to be doing. So, a few years ago, I went through Srila Prabhupada. Always going through Prabhupada's books, but I generated this list, and I just want to share it with you now. And I'm not going to touch on all these points, but I'll touch on ones that I find that are more significant. Now, I've got six major points here. The first one is Rupa Goswami recommends deity worship as one of the 5 principal items of devotional service. This is recorded in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it says, associating with devotees, chanting the holy name, studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, worshipping the deity with faith and veneration, and residing in a holy place. These are the 5 most potent forms of devotional service. And he goes on to mention that even if one is without faith, if they're a little bit connected with one of these 5 items, it will reawaken one's dormant love of Krishna. So even if you have no faith that these items function or work, that just by being connected with something like deity worship, then it can reawaken your dormant love for Krishna. And then by worshipping the deity, a devotee gets the benefit of worshipping all the forms of the Lord. I'll discuss this a little more deeply in a few moments, but that's quite an interesting statement from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The deity worship reminds us that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and we are the servants of Krishna. Because the tendency in the material world is we give all the attention to our body, we give all the affection to our body. But the idea in deity worship is we give all this to Krishna. We offer him all opulence, we offer him beautiful prasadam, etc. Now, another very important point, which I'm sure you'll find this very relevant for your situation, is householders who worship deities at home have a great opportunity to bring up children in an atmosphere of practical Krishna consciousness. So you can, I remember years ago, I was visiting a friend in the south of England. He's since passed away now, but they had Gaunitai deities in their home, and their children used to come in and offer things to the deities every day. They'd bring them flowers and things like that. Then one day the boy, he saw his mummy sort of offering arati with incense and flowers, and then he wanted to offer something to Krishna, so he came in with his teddy bear and he was sort of offering his teddy bear in circles to the deities. So the idea is like when they see their parents doing things like that, then they also want to imitate their parents, who are their dominant role models. And of course, we can look in the Bhagavatam how great personalities such as Gajendra and Bharat Maharaj, they remembered their experiences of worshipping the Lord from the past, and this actually brought them great success. in spiritual life. And another very, very important element of deity worship is the personal purification that it brings about. So I already touched on the essence of the five principal items of devotional service, and how they can reawaken one's love of Godhead. Now, there's an interesting statement that I found in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto, chapter 2. And in that purport there, it talks about how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he's describing the five types of incarnations of the Lord. And he talks about the para. Oh, someone else is coming. Oh, Merle's coming. Good. Yeah, he talks about the five principal incarnations of the Lord. Thank you for coming, Merle. We have a guest in our midst from London, England. Merle is the head pujari from the London temple. He worships Sri Radha Nrsimha. Thank you for coming, Merle. Really appreciate it. Then, so we have, like I said, there's para, there's vyuha, there's antaryami, the vaibhav, and of course the archa. And so the para, this means Krishna in his original form. Now, Rupa Goswami, he describes in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, in the first section, chapter 5, how para, or the para avasta, refers to three specific forms of the Lord. Of course, it refers to Krishna, but it also refers to Lord Ramachandra, and it also refers to Lord Nrsimha. These are very, very important forms of Krishna for the devotee. And the reason these three are so important is because they are full in the six qualities, of Godhead or of an incarnation, whereas the other incarnations may have things to a greater or lesser degree. But these three are full in the six qualities of this that have been pointed out by Parasharama Muni. This Aishvarya and knowledge and fame and all renunciation, etc., beauty, strength. Yeah. So they're full in all those things. Of course, we find that the Krishna, he is the most full in these things, and he is obviously the Swayam Bhagavan original from who all the others emanate. But he is the most prominent, or the most full in all these things. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he makes a very interesting statement that he says that all the plenary expansions of the Lord mentioned above, so those five, the para, vyuha, vaibhav, antaryami, and are all contained within the deity. So this is quite an amazing statement, and the one who is engaged in deity worship gets the benefit of worshipping all these different forms of Krishna. So very, very important understanding there that actually, because the Lord, wherever Krishna is present, then all the incarnations are present there with Krishna. But the point that he's making here is that by worshipping the deity, you don't have to go to these other forms separately, to the Vaibhav, the Leela, the pastime forms of the Lord, or to the Chatabhyuha, or any of these other forms. Just by worshipping the deity, you'll get the benefit of worshipping all these other forms. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, Krishna is so kind that to encourage even the lowest class of Vaishnava, he condenses all of his various forms, just like we see the Chatabhyuha or all these gigantic forms of the Lord. He condenses them, because sometimes you have a deity so small you can fit the deity in the palm of your hand, like with a shalagram. He condenses all these various forms into the deity, so that by worshipping the deity, the Kanistha Adhikari devotee is worshipping all the forms of the Lord. As the devotee makes advancement, he can understand these forms as they appear in their own way, both within this world and in the spiritual sky. So another very, very important point that is there. And of course, we can see that there's so much benefit for the householders when they have deities at home. The children can be inspired in Krishna consciousness. And then lastly, about I just wanted to touch on the Lord helps us to subdue our material contamination, or deity worship helps us to subdue material contamination. And a few very nice references there. in the Bhagavatam, the 6th canto. To keep oneself clean in habits and mind, we engage in deity worship. By, as we see in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, it taught this anadbhavanti bhutani, how if we eat sanctified food, then our conscience becomes sanctified and we become free from sin. And then, when we worship the deity at home, it also helps us to, we live in a sanctified place, and by living in a sanctified place, our consciousness becomes sanctified. And then, of course, it helps us to develop internal purity, external purity, helps to become more and more situated in the mode of goodness. And then by offering everything we have, because as Krishna points out at the end of the 3rd chapter of the Gita, he says that, work done as a sacrifice of Vishnu must be performed, otherwise work will cause bondage in this material world. So if we're doing things for our own sake, these things are causing us to be bound up in this material world. But if we're doing these same things, the same items for the pleasure of Krishna, then we become freed from this bondage. So it's a very, very important activity. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say. And of course, there's many, many benefits that we can go over. I can just touch briefly on a few because I don't want to go too much longer. Deity worship helps to keep pure and clean. It gives the opportunity to have Krishna's form in the mind. Gives us the opportunity to become pious. People derive great benefit. We become attached to Krishna. We purify our existence, and etc. So many nice things like that. I have many references that I have to share with you all. As I mentioned, I've got 3 links to different videos I would encourage you to watch before our next webinar next week. And then I've got 4 or 5 files with different references of the benefits of deity worship, discussions on why worship the deity, etc., like that. Okay, so now, if it's okay with you, I was thinking we could open it up for questions now. So we can do this any way you like. You can speak the questions, or you can type them in the chat, and I can just answer them. Yeah. No. No one wants to speak. No one's got a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dayanand Prabhu here. Dandavat Pranam. Just a quick
Right,
question.
Dayanand Prabhu. Basically, Prabhupada.
I'll go with Prabhu. But just a quick standard in terms of setting up the altar for, especially for newcomers. What are the basic altars? How to set up, and how one should set up according to the home deity standards.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you were there at the beginning, but on the 3rd lesson, we're going to cover that in quite a lot of detail. I have a lot of pictures of different altars just to show you the variety that is there. Yeah, so if you don't mind, we could leave that to the third presentation, because
Okay,
it's
sure.
on its own.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Vaishnavis. Prabhupada. You have a question, Prabhu?
Prabhuji, is there any specific time to worship deities at home, or like particular time we can do every day same time, or if we are busy and something else comes up, so we can change the time, do it different times every day, or sometimes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and something that obviously is something that is an important point for grihastas who are working or sometimes do shift work and things like that. You will find it easier if you do things at a regulated time every day, and you also will find it's more beneficial for you in terms of controlling the mind and senses if you do things at a regulated time every day. But then, modern world, modern sort of, family life, work life, etc., like that, not always easy. But there are some guidelines or prohibitions given in the scriptures how that one needs to before they eat themselves they should feed the Lord and things like that. And oftentimes with these types of things, it's a matter of like, how do you prioritize things? Do you put the Lord's needs first, or do you put your needs first? But then, of course, we see that when we're in a family situation and we have children, young children to take care of and things like that, sometimes we may need to adjust a little bit, But there is plenty of scope for adjustment. And when we talk a little bit about on the third lesson, we talk a little bit about looking at the different types of deities that we worship. There's also some discussion there about what you can do in different circumstances. Yeah, is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Nrsimha Prabhu. Everyone's
Hare
shy
Krishna.
today. I'm the only person who's on camera.
Only person who's not on a camera.
Huh?
Maybe by next time I'll be more prepared. I just had a quick question. It was actually from my mother. She wanted to know if when we're doing and engaging ourselves in deity worship, how do we know whether the Lord is happy with what we are offering or happy with the way we are serving him? How do we know what how the Lord would I guess reciprocate, as you touched on that topic earlier this session?
Yeah. I get into this a little bit more in the fifth class. Go into it in detail a bit there and describe it from the scriptural perspective. But essentially, because like if you look at the different divisions of bhakti, right, what we're doing is called Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Now, what does Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti mean? It means following the rules and regulations of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master. So the fact that we're doing that means Krishna is pleased. It's as simple as that. It's not like he's kind of sort of start dancing on the altar and say yippee yippee, you cook something really nice for me or something like that. It's not that kind of reciprocation, but just the fact that you're following the process of bhakti according to the directions of the Shastra, according to the directions of the spiritual master in the previous acharyas, then that's pleasing to Krishna. Why? Because he gave the system. Yeah. So the fact that you're trying to follow the system means you're trying to please him. And as he says in the fourth chapter of the Gita, very, very important verse in relation to deity worship is Yayatamam prapadante tam satai bhajamya. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So just by the fact that we're trying to please Krishna through the process of bhakti, through deity worship, then that's pleasing to Krishna. And as we evolve more and more spiritually, we will become more aware of how we're pleasing Krishna. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Prabhu.
Because the thing is, like in the beginning stages of devotional service, we don't really have the necessary qualification to understand if we're pleasing Krishna, or our if you like, our notion of Krishna being pleased may be somewhat materially contaminated, whereas we need to develop spiritually to understand what is really pleasing to Krishna and to know whether or not I'm pleasing him. Does that you understand that point?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much for that.
Great. Okay, so there's another question here. It's written to me privately, so I guess I won't read out who it's from. As a neophyte bhakta and a starter in deity worship, what's the worst aparad one can commit? I don't worry so much about aparads. And we see that Srila Prabhupada didn't really emphasize aparads very much. Prabhupada was more proactive, positive kind of person, and he would just encourage devotees to, to try to serve the deity with love and devotion. And we see like he only spoke about aparads in 3 places, I think I can remember. One was in the Nectar of Devotion in chapter 8. Another one was in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, 7.5, 23, 24. And another one was in the 24th chapter of the Madhya Lila, the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He didn't really put so much emphasis on aparad, but of course there are the acharyas do give aparads in deity worship, and of course there's aparads of neglect, there's aparads of laziness, there's physical aparads, there's mental aparads. But I think if we get too caught up in the aparads, it will paralyze us. It's like what's they call it, paralysis by analysis. We'll analyze all the different aparads that are there, and we won't do anything. I'd rather encourage you just to try to see that Krishna is directly present before you as a deity, and do everything you can within your means to please him. And in that way, you'll make progress. It's a very simple process, and it's not, I mean, I do come across sometimes devotees, oh, this is an offense, that is an offense, but that scares people away. We're trying to encourage people to come closer to Krishna, not discourage them and scare them away from Krishna. So, then another letter privately is, can we do arti after taking prasad sometimes if we get late for some reason? Yes, you can do that, but then as I was mentioning before, there are directions in scriptures pointing out that it's better that you take care of Krishna's needs first. It's just like, if we see Krishna as the most important person, then naturally we're going to want to make sure that he's taken care of before I worry about myself. It's just like, if your guru comes to town, or if Prabhupada was in town, we see that when Prabhupada was visiting temples, devotees would just go out of their way to serve Srila Prabhupada and just to do everything they could to please Srila Prabhupada. And they would generally put their own needs aside. Now, of course, when we're dealing with children, someone else just turned up. When we're dealing with children, I think we need to also keep in mind the positive preaching element with children, because if we have this, say for instance, the child comes in the room, the child's feeling hungry, and you say to the child, oh, sorry, no, you can't eat now because I've got to serve the deity. And if it always happens like that, then it's possible, I'm not saying it'll happen, but it's possible that the child will develop a somewhat negative attitude towards deity worship. We don't want that, because that's actually, that might be considered as not very successful parenting. Rather, you would want the child to develop a positive attitude towards deity worship and see how, my parents have always been so loving towards me, and that, therefore I want to be like them. I want to, they worship the deity with great love, and I want to be like that also. Another question here is it necessary to chant 16 rounds before touching the deity? No, not necessary to chant 16 rounds before touching the deity. But of course, if one is chanting regularly, japa, it's good to make sure we chant those rounds every day. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, especially, if you travel, for instance, or, maybe your schedule is you worship the deity early in the morning, and to have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning or something before worshiping the deity. I've had devotees telling me you have to chant Gayatri before touching the deity, you have to chant your rounds before touching the deity. I know of no injunctions in the scriptures that indicate that at all. So if you can do it, that's nice, but not necessary. Yeah. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Prabhu, I have a question. What is the basic quality to start up a deity worship, or minimum requirements?
Faith. It's the basis of bhakti. Like if you look in the scriptures, Rupa Goswami, he said adoshada. He says first there's faith, tata sadhu. Then you associate with devotees, tabhajana kriya, anata nivriti shat. So then you have faith, you associate with devotees. You have faith. Oh, I think Krishna is God. I like this Hare Krishna. Then you associate with devotees. Devotees give you some guidance on how to practice bhakti. Bhajana kriya. That's the practice of bhakti. Anata nivriti. And through the process of following sadhana bhakti, the anathas are purified. So faith is the beginning. We just have faith that this is, you know, the right spiritual process. We have faith that the deity is God, and then we just move forward in that way. Yeah,
Nice.
it's like there's no big qualification, you know, especially for home worship. You just have faith that you want to serve Krishna, you want to please Krishna, and that's all you need. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
My pleasure. Okay. Okay. Should we welcome Radha Krishna first or Gaur Nitai? So I'll talk about this more extensively on the third weekend, the third Saturday. I generally encourage devotees to start with Panchatattva picture first. I find that's much more suitable, especially in the home environment, for someone who doesn't have much experience or doesn't have much time. Because it's interesting, when you have a picture of the Panchatattva, first thing is, Prabhupada says Guru Garanga, meaning Panchatattva and the spiritual masters. One of the points he makes is that the Panchatattva and the spiritual master are very merciful. And therefore they're willing to overlook our shortcomings. And then by doing picture worship, it gives you the advantage of, you know, getting used to the idea of doing worship of a deity, whatever, without actually having the obligation that comes along with having a three-dimensional deity. If you have a three-dimensional deity, as Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur wrote, he said, Sri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana. So that means, like, if you have a deity, you have to worship him every day. It's not just a once a week or once a fortnight, you know, a Kodasi or a once a month idea. It means daily worship. So that's the direction of our acharyas. So therefore, I generally encourage devotees to start with Panchatattva picture, so they get familiarized with the process, and then, you know, as they evolve in the process of worship, they can see if they want to go further with it or whether they're happy just to stick with pictures. Yeah. Then next question we have is, can we have deities other than Lord Krishna in the altar? Of course. Generally, we start with, you know, as I mentioned, Prabhupada, when he started new centers in the early days, he would always start with Panchatattva picture and pictures of the Guru Parampara. And then generally he would go to Gaur Nitai, then to Jagannath Bala Subhadra, and then finally, if he saw the temples had enough Brahmins and they were steady, he would encourage them to install Radha Krishna deities. Were you thinking, Sesha, were you thinking of other deities besides those standard ones? Do you have anything else in mind? Like what, Lakshmi Narayan or Devatas, or what were you thinking? Yeah, but you can have, you know, generally have Krishna. We don't have Krishna on his own. We'll have Krishna with Radha, and as we are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we'll always have at least Lord Chaitanya, if not Gaur Nitai. So Venkateshwara is Krishna, so that's fine. Yeah, Venkateshwara is Krishna, he's fine. But generally Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because in Gaudiya Vaishnavas, in the Ishta Devata of the Sampradaya is Radha Krishna. All our acharyas and all the devotees in our Sampradaya, they'll worship Radha Krishna. So that, you know, the Ishta Devata means like they're our ultimate goal of worship. So yeah, but, you know, if one has a particular affection for Balaji or you know, these other deities, that's also fine. I also know sometimes in India, when people get married, is their relatives, you know, especially the parents, will give them deities of the devatas as part of, you know, like from the family village or whatever. And, you know, rather than disrespect the parents, I generally encourage devotees to, you know, to worship those deities as servants of Krishna. So you are, you know, when you do the worship, you offer them Mahaprasadam from your deities, etc., like that. Because, you know, you don't want your parents to think, oh, you know, now they've become Hare Krishnas, they don't respect me properly, or, you know, they become fanatical or whatever like that. So yeah. Then Murli Manohar has written, is there a formal installation needed for home deities? Generally not. If you're starting worship of deities in your home, then I would encourage you to maybe have a function where you invite devotees, you have a senior devotee speaking about the importance of deity worship, and you can distribute Krishna Prasad. But no need to do a formal program at all. Then where can we get deities from? I would say it depends what deities you want, depends how much money you want to spend. There are some Murti Wallahs in Vrindavan, for instance, who carve very, very beautiful deities, but they're very expensive. Most of the deities in North India these days are made in and around Vrindavan, near to Vrindavan. There are some made in West Bengal, especially the brass deities. If you want wooden deities, if you want wooden Jagannath deities, then you go to Puri. If you want wooden Gaunitai, you go to a place, you go either to Eka Chakra or Bankura. They're good places to get wooden deities. Marble deities, obviously, Jaipur is the best place for that. Resin deities, they make resin deities in China these days. But it really depends what deities you want. Of course, in South India, there's a lot of places down there you can also get deities. Just really depends what you're looking for. Pandurang Vitala, fine, you can have him on the altar. We also worship Vitala. I remember going to his temple a few years ago. Very, 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 very nice temple there. A beautiful darshan. And we got to get right close up to Pandurang and had the opportunity to put my head on his lotus feet. It's quite nice. Okay, so Pitra and Baba photo. I don't know what Baba means father. Is that correct? Yeah, frames of deities are allowed on the altar, but Baba, I generally wouldn't put parents and relatives on the altar because they're not transcendental personalities. I would leave the altar for transcendental personalities and great servants, who are naturally transcendental personalities, great servants of Krishna. I wouldn't be so keen to be putting, photos of relatives and things. Of course, if you want to respect the relatives, you can have photos of them in the same room as the deities are being worshipped, but I wouldn't put them on the altar. I can also send out Nrsimha, who was asking for schedule. Sure, I can send that out. If Srinivas, if you can add me to your WhatsApp group, then
Yes, Prabhu, I already had it, Prabhu.
Okay, great, because I've got a number of files I want to share with you all.
Okay, Prabhu, I already added, Prabhu.
Those files, I'll just quickly go over them for you, so you know what I'm sending you is where are your lessons? So I have a list of benefits of deity worship, then the class names and overview, some deity stories, they're very interesting stories of deities, then just different links you can check out on our YouTube channel. There's some interviews with Banu Swami about why worship the deity and things like that. Let's see what we've got. Why worship the deity? I can't remember what the other one is. And there's also a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, as I mentioned before, where he's walking in the Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. Now, the point that's relevant to deity worship goes up to 3 minutes and 40 seconds. After that, he starts talking about another topic. And then, of course, there's a list of interesting quotes, which you might all find very helpful to understand more and more about this topic. Yeah? So I'll forward all those to you via the WhatsApp channel, or the WhatsApp, group. Yeah? Okay? So
thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Next week we'll talk about the balance, finding the balance and discussing different standards of worship in deity worship. It's kind of interesting for me because, as I said, like I've taught this many times, in a classroom setting, but to do it online, it's like I completely have to rethink how I'm doing it because it's there's not as much scope for the feedback that you get in a classroom environment. So anyhow. Okay, thank you all very much. Really appreciate your participation and appreciate your asking me to present this for your pleasure. And look forward to seeing you all next week. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Right.
Hare
Hare Krishna.